以下节目包含成人内容，请在家长指引下收听。欢迎收听文化土豆，我是益康糯米。今天我想介绍一个文化土豆的新栏目。订阅我们会员通讯的朋友，几个月前就听说了我在伦敦准备和朋友一起创办一个小书店的消息。随着店面装修接近尾声，我准备和书店的合伙人 Richard 在文化土豆上开辟一个 pop-up 新栏目，用简单和慢速的英文讨论我们书店的准备工作。今后走向正轨，我们可能会单独开辟一个书店自己的 podcast 或者是 YouTube 频道。但在这之前，敬请收听 Culture Potato, A New Hope. Welcome to Culture Potato, A New Hope. This is a brand new slow English speaking podcast where my friend Richard and I are going to talk about our brand new project, a bookshop in London. Yay!
Hey!
Hi, Richard.
Hello.
Could you introduce yourself to our listeners and maybe say one interesting thing about our friendship?
So, hello everyone. My name is Richard. I've been a friend of Yifan for about 15 years. He describes me as bookish because I grew up amongst lots of books. My father's in the book business. I've worked in bookshops. I've worked in publishing companies. I've even worked for my father, and I'm always wanting to buy books and reading them. So that's roughly why I'm here.
And I just want to add, until very recently, because we have to work on this bookshop project, Richard had no internet at home.
Oh yeah, that's right. Indeed. I'm new to the internet.
How hardcore Richard is.
Yeah, sceptical of all the inventions after the book. So, Yifan, what's the latest, or at least how is the bookshop looking? How's the site progressing towards completion?
So, I have been in this project. Our division of labor, or what each of us do, is I have been taking charge on the decoration buildings work of the bookshop, while Richard is preparing on the content and what books to choose. So in the last month, I have been working with builders and the interior designer on the site. Our bookshop is tiny. It's about 25 or 30 at a push, maybe 25 square meters.
Something like that.
In England, it's probably in square feet. I have no idea what that is. We currently have strengthened all the walls to make it stronger because we have some hanging bookshelves. So we have one bookshelf that's freestanding and two shelves are hanging, so screwed onto the wall. So the wall needs to be able to bear heavy weight.
Strong, yeah.
Yeah. The builders have put plaster on the wall now, so it's now painted white, but we are going to paint it, give it another coat of paint. So we have been choosing paint colors over the last week. I forget what color we have settled on.
I think it was called something like ash grey. And what was it?
No, that's for the floor.
No, ash grey is for the wall. And for the floor, was it called like scree or something?
Scree. Okay, so we have a concrete looking floor, and we have a bluish, I think it's not, is it grey? To me, it was bluish wall. Anyway.
Yeah.
Yet to be done are lights, installing spotlights and a hanging pendant light in the middle. That looks like a book, actually. You haven't seen the light, have you?
I've only seen photos.
Okay.
It looks very nice. Very, very tasteful.
That's half of our budget.
As is to be expected from you.
And then I have ordered the checkout machine. So it's like an iPad. No, it's like an iPhone thing where people can swipe their credit card or contactless card. And I'm hoping to get Alipay and WeChat Pay a machine to do that as well, because there are a lot of Chinese students in London who may benefit from that, or we may benefit from their custom.
Yeah, we may. That's right.
What else is to be done? I think the toilet. Yeah, we have a small toilet, and the toilets needs to be installed.
Very important. God. Especially with coronavirus, there are no public loos, no public toilets.
Oh, but maybe we shouldn't say that we have a toilet. It's not a public toilet.
It's not a public toilet, but otherwise we can't.
When people ask, we have no toilets.
People ask, we have no toilets, but we definitely need a toilet for ourselves.
If you're a listener of Culture Potato, this is crazy. Okay. So this is our shop. Our shop is in an area called Hoxton. That's Hoxton, Hoxton. That's in East London. So Richard, why don't you're a West Londoner, tell us about East London and Hoxton.
I was actually born not very far from the shop, but by the time I was 4 years old, my parents moved west. But obviously West London is where, typically is thought of more affluent than the East and so forth. So East London, Hoxton, traditionally a working class part of London. Nowadays, like with all these, like a lot of former working class areas in major European cities, they're undergoing a lot of change, a lot of what people call gentrification, and Hoxton is not immune to that. It's also
if anything, it's a pioneer of.
Yeah, it could even be considered a pioneer. Definitely probably in London it would be a pioneer. Of course, in the late 90s, when Britpop was all the rage, the famous the video clip of the Verve's A Bittersweet Symphony by the Verve, where you see
band.
That's a band,
right? And
this singer is walking down Hoxton Street, barging into people, or at least he's not making way for anybody else. He's just walking down in a straight line. Anyway, that's Hoxton.
We'll post a link to that video.
We'll post a link. I definitely will post a link to the video. And that is Hoxton, and that street's probably not changed that much. There's just a few more hipster new places. I don't know. Yeah, are they hipster places? I don't know. Definitely weren't there when the video was shot. But otherwise, it probably retains a similar feel.
There's a very famous British person laying rest nearby our bookshop. Our address is 99 East Road, about 5 minutes walk. I would say 10 minutes walk at most. We have
the Bunhill, is it called Bunhill Cemetery?
Yes.
Or Bunhill Fields, where William Blake is buried. And isn't it Daniel Defoe as well?
Daniel Defoe of Treasure Island?
No, he's of Robinson Crusoe.
Yes.
Different island.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's somebody else we're missing out. But anyway, Daniel Defoe and obviously William Blake will do for a bookshop.
That's where we will be having our sandwiches during lunch breaks.
Exactly, that's where we'll be having our lunch breaks. Look forward to it. At one point, you thought of calling or referring to it as the podcast bookshop. Can you elucidate?
That was my idea, and nobody understood the idea. It was a much misunderstood idea. I might still launch a campaign to make it our tagline, the podcast bookshop.
Hoxton Books, the podcast bookshop. Okay.
Because I think there is a idea that people who love the internet and social media, who stay on Weibo, WeChat all the time, they don't read books. And books is for bookish people who are, who have no internet at home.
Yeah, no internet.
No TV.
Who are skeptical of everything that was invented after the book.
Yeah. And that concept is very strange to me, because I have, obviously been an ex-journalist, or somewhat probably still working in a field that's related to journalism. I love books, and social media because our job is essentially transferring knowledge from books to social media. And in Chinese, we call this brick carrying.
Right.
So a lot of marketing people and journalists, writers, their job is essentially brick carrying.
Book carrying, but book
either
carrying.
From the English-speaking world to the Chinese world, or from a book to more popular fields. Yeah. And also, I think podcast is a medium where you really engage with the content like you do with a book. You spend hours on it.
But it's sort of like an individual
thing.
It's
a very private thing.
Yeah, private thing,
Yeah.
exactly.
And so I think they go together. And I take book recommendations from a lot of podcasters. So I thought, why don't we use this as an angle for our bookshop? And because you need a unique selling point nowadays.
What's the last book you read, or at least the last book you opened that was recommended to you by a podcast?
Can I talk about the next one? So the next bookshop, the next one is it's a cookbook by Otter.ai and one of his collaborators.
Oh yeah.
So
is that his husband?
The Palestinian?
What's he called? Is he called Sammy?
No, so it's someone else, maybe someone else.
Sammy Tamimi.
But it's about vegetarian cooking and vegetables.
Okay. And
I heard it on KCRW, the Good Food podcast.
Oh, right.
Yesterday, and I thought, wow, okay, very good. So that was the next one. Previous one. The thing is, since I started the book club project for Culture Potatoes and my nonfiction project Unpack, I have no time to read other. I have no.
It's a lot of projects you've got going on.
No, it's just with this A New Hope. It's just 4 because there are 4 weeks each month,
and a bookshop. Yeah.
Yeah. So each week I do a different thing. That is to say, so my podcast listening has decreased the time I spent on podcast.
Sure.
We'll have opportunities to recommend other podcasts plenty. The next question I want to ask you is, obviously, London's bookshops the best. So looking at our competitors, or not necessarily competitors, tell our listeners 3 independent bookshops that you love. Okay.
So first of all, we'll start with Daunt's. That's the most obvious one because they're almost like, they are independent, but they're like a mini chain as well because they've got quite a few. They've got 4 or 5 bookshops in London, mostly in the west and the north. The flagship shop in Marylebone is essentially based on it essentially grew out of a travel bookshop, and they still categorize their books by country.
Like Lonely Planet travel books or travel literature.
Well, travel literature. So they do in the sense that under each country you find guides, like, Lonely Planet, etc. But you'll have books about the history of that place and writers from there. Or at least in translation, but the major writers from that place. So in a way, you'd have history, fiction, and guidebooks all mixed together by country, if that makes sense.
I love Daunt's, but somehow they are the least. They are almost the opposite to the way I would imagine our shop. I don't know why.
Yes, we're definitely. Probably won't be doing much by country. I don't know, unless we have this whole.
But also, they have a very English cottage.
Yeah, there's something quite. Yeah, there's something quite traditional, or exactly, quite cottagey, very English. Maybe what we could say a bit.
I like how you when you said very English, your French accent. Surfaced. Richard is half French, by the way.
I'm half French, but it feels quite safe.
You were saying twee is the
twee, but twee. I don't know if that's I don't know how accurate a word. It's great though. It's great if obviously like people who come from abroad love going there, and because it's very I don't know if picturesque is the word, but
and
they
probably have the most visible tote bag.
Oh yeah, they got
around.
the whole. Yeah, they got the whole. They got the pioneers they send throughout the world with their tote bags.
Yeah.
Referencing themselves.
Yeah.
People buy the travel books. They get the tote bag. They travel elsewhere with their tote bag.
So it's a long-standing tradition.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
Must be.
Yeah. Okay, number 2 choice.
So number 2, probably a bookshop that's not very far from where Hoxton Books is, and that's the Broadway bookshop on Broadway Market. And that's a relatively small shop, but with the space they have, they do very well with filling it with books, or at least books that I would love to read. There's not much, when we talk about separating the wheat from the chaff, I'd say there isn't much chaff in that bookshop.
Why is there so many agricultural metaphors and in English, and separating the sheep from the what?
The wheat from the chaff.
Yeah, but also people say...
separating sheep. I don't know, white sheep and black sheep.
No, lamb from the sheep? I don't know.
Oh, yes. Lamb dressed as mutton. Is that what you're talking about?
No, never mind. Skip forward. But I would recommend, like... visitors to London to check out Broadway Market. It's probably not in any guidebook, and yet it's probably the most London, in a way, I don't know, young London, hipster London place.
Definitely young London. It's very young London.
If you want to see how young people in London live,
you go to Broadway Market.
In a idealized.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's true.
There's a lot of self-love.
There's definitely a lot of self-love. Yeah, they're very pleased with themselves.
Yes.
But definitely the bookshop is great, and the bookshop's been there a while. Yeah, I really don't have a bad word to say about them. Another bookshop I find interesting is in Chelsea, in West London, very affluent area, and that's Sandoz. They're like, the ceilings are so low. There's maybe 2 floors. Yeah, there's 2 floors. Low ceilings, books stacked everywhere. Except they're all new books. So you could, you imagine that kind of bookshop. You imagine selling secondhand books where they've just have all these secondhand books and they don't know where to put them. Here, it's all new books. They're all sort of stacked everywhere. Lots of art books. Big expensive art books that people in Chelsea will buy.
Coffee table books.
Yeah, but not too frivolous coffee table books, like serious coffee table books.
Okay.
And then they like to they stack, so on their tables they like stacking books by author. So for instance, you might have Philip Roth, and all his books are on top of each other on a table.
Okay.
So different titles, they mix them up. So you unwind the pile to find the entire oeuvre of a particular writer.
So how is Broadway? Because you mentioned Daunt's in their flagship travel shop. Things are organized by country, right? It's like a geography department. And then in Sandoz. Is it called Sandals or Sando? Sando.
But with an apostrophe S at the end.
Okay.
So it's like Sandoz.
Yeah. They are organized by author.
Yeah, so but they have a more traditional way of running things by sort of, fiction and fiction A to Z. But then when you look on the tables, they'll have it's a bit I'm not saying it's messy.
Yeah.
But they can also, you might find on the shelf of Philip Roth, there might be 1 or 2 books. But then if you look on the table, there might be more there.
So it's a bit random.
So it's maybe a bit random, yeah.
And what about in Broadway books?
Broadway bookshop is... They
It's a
go
topic.
for a bit of country. Yeah, no, they also like the country thing, where if you look under France, you'll find books about France as well as books by French writers, which is how I should have described Daunt's earlier.
And how are you going to organize books in our bookshop?
So how we're going to organize them? Well, either by... So there are all sorts of... I think there's all sorts of ways, and they might intersect in different ways. So we might have a shelf with books recommended by certain people, but which might also figure in...
So we're talking about Obama's reading list.
Yeah, so we could talk about Obama's reading list, but that might, there might be one or two things there that double up with, say, a shelf full of books by people who write for The New Yorker.
Yeah.
As well as maybe we'd have books on certain topics. They might intersect with the book, I don't know, to do with Black Lives Matter, for instance.
Okay. Not my podcast.
Sorry?
No.
Oh, yeah. Of course, podcast. But the podcasts are your thing, the podcasts.
Right, so the...
Yeah, definitely, for instance, I mean, I don't know, Start the Week is the obvious one when it comes to at least non-fiction books.
Yeah, that's a popular UK BBC radio show that's also a podcast.
Yeah.
Anyway, right, okay.
You've stuck me there.
But we might talk about this more in detail in a future episodes.
Yes, exactly. That's how we're going to categorize and how we're going to shelve everything. Is
by almost recommendations different from different places.
Yeah, exactly. Recommendations, but from different sources. See how that pans out. See how we manage that.
Yeah. Okay. More on that in a future episode. And also, I think our listeners, this is going to be a simple English, slow English, shorter program that we're hoping to. So in future episodes of A New Hope, one week we might talk about our bookshelves, another week we might talk about our book lists, whatever you want to hear about our Hoxton Books bookshop, let us know, and then we'll try to talk about it. And lastly, for today, can you, that is Richard, recommend a podcast, and perhaps an English podcast you like?
Okay, so thinking about this, I'm going to go for a podcast which is completely just different. In fact, maybe a lot of people who are into books or read books are not necessarily interested in, i.e. football. So this is a podcast about English football, where these various supporters, mostly youngish guys, who all support a different team, gather around the television watching a Premier League game, but they end up just talking about football. So they comment on the game a bit. So last Sunday it was the North London derby between Arsenal and Tottenham, but most of the time they're just talking to each other about various things going on in with football, and it lasts for about 3 hours or something. I think you can even catch them on Twitch live, but then they also release a podcast.
Ooh, that's a highly technical term coming from someone who's not very technical. Twitch.
Yeah. Twitch. I'm with the Twitch kids. Except that my understanding is Twitch is just people playing video games. But in this case, they're watching football and they're just reacting to what's going on either during the match or more widely. And they're a fun bunch. They're a ragtag collection. So different supporters. So there's one guy who support Liverpool, another guy supports Chelsea. Then they have a guest on, depending on one of the teams that's playing, and they joke around, and I don't know. They're kind of like kind of people I don't hear about in my life. I don't really know many people who support football, even though I live in England. So it's just refreshing, basically, and keeps you up to date with what's going on in world of football.
Okay, and very lastly, Richard, before we say goodbye, this month. A new word, a new hope. Okay, this is our finishing segment. Tell our listeners a fun English word that they may not know.
Okay, sure. So we have a word which is probably a bit informal to mean food.
Like, do you want food?
Like, I'm starving. Let's have some grub.
Grub.
Grub. So that's spelled Grub. Grub. I'm not sure what the origin is, but definitely it's at least London term understood by all. Have some grub. But it's also, or at least if you combine it with the word street, Grub Street. Grub Street refers to aspiring writers, poets, trying to make a living, I don't know, in about 19th century. And Grub Street was a street not very far from our bookshop. In fact, also close to where William Blake and Daniel Defoe, we mentioned, were buried. So this street no longer exists, but it was round there. And it was just a sort of bohemian place where writers, poets, aspiring journalists, I don't know, lived or
So it's a
around.
general term. You can say Grub Street to refer to collectively.
And there's a column, I think in the satirical magazine Private Eye, there's a column about sort of the world of journalists and basically what we call hacks.
Yeah.
And the column is called Grub Street.
That's too many words. Hacks. Okay. Let's hit stop and have some takeaway grub. Does that even work? 希望你喜欢这期节目。下期是我们的误读会，阅读的书目是北京作家王朔的《顽主》和同名小说集里的一些其他内容。有兴趣和我们一起读书的朋友可以开始看了。感谢所有文化土豆赞助人的支持，让我可以坚持制作这个节目，并且不断尝试新的内容形式。赞助人可以独享我每月播出的非虚构栏目 Unpack， 收到主播的会员通讯，还可以一起制作我们的地下刊物土豆小报。更多信息请访问文化土豆的官网 culturepotato.com。